Picture a 45-year-old woman sitting in a creaking wooden chair. If you look closely, you see more than the passage of time. You see a hollow dread, a terror that has clearly replaced every other part of her identity. Deepa is a casualty of targeted supernatural warfare. She is the living result of a specific branch of Tantra designed to bypass the conscious mind and systematically consume a victim's youth. The process began in 1985. Deepa was 16, moving with her family into an old house in a town they didn't know. Her parents noticed a lingering, damp smell of decay, but they dismissed it as the scent of an aging building. That smell of rot signaled a presence already rooted in the foundation. The trap had been set long before the family arrived. It was simply waiting for a body to occupy the space. The entity made contact the very next morning. Deepa was walking through a freezing, empty school corridor when a voice whispered from the ceiling, "You're finally here. I've been waiting for you." Driven by cognitive dissonance, the brain smooths out terrifying information, recasting a horrific voice as a mere hallucination. But Deepa's biology fought this logic. Puberty creates intense emotional energy centers, acting as a vortex, a frequency that physically attracts external paranormal forces. Between the stress of the move and the biological transition of her teenage years, with all of this happening, Deepa unknowingly provided the exact energetic frequency the unseen entity needed to permanently anchor itself directly to her. The escalation turned violent at a family wedding. Deepa, normally shy and reserved, suddenly fixed her eyes on her aunt and threw the woman across the room with enough force to crack the wall. When medical sedatives failed to calm her, the family turned to a female tantric, an occult specialist. But the entity immediately spoke through Deepa, telling the tantric that interfering would cost her everything. The retaliation was swift. That afternoon, the tantric's son was working in a flat field when his tractor inexplicably flipped over, crushing him instantly. This is a lethal demonstration of territorial dominance. The entity didn't view the tantric as a healer, but as a combatant attempting to seize territory it had already won. Logic and medicine were useless because they were treating Deepa as a patient. To the entity, Deepa wasn't a person to be cured. She was a secured perimeter. Her father eventually took her to Pir Nigehen. This shrine is known as a place of last resort for those dealing with forces that cannot be bargained with. Pir Nigehen functions as a supernatural court. It is an environment where the spiritual pressure is so high that dark entities are forced to speak their true names and intentions. Under the influence of the shrine, the entity finally confessed. It revealed itself as a graveyard spirit and made a chilling claim. It was Deepa's husband. Possession is typically an act of spiritual trespassing, but this was different. The entity was claiming a formal, ritualistic union. It argued that by the laws of the cemetery, Deepa was its property. The family realized they were no longer fighting a haunting. They were trying to break a contract, and they needed to find the person who had signed it on Deepa's behalf. The investigation led back to a man named Puneet. He had been rejected by Deepa's older sister, Poonam, and his resentment had curdled into a desire for revenge. Puneet found a discarded scarf he believed belonged to Poonam. He took it to a dark practitioner who tied the fabric to a graveyard ghost through a physical doll, known as a todka. This ritual relies on the law of contagion. Objects once in contact with a person retain a permanent link to their life force. The tantric used the scarf's organic residue as spiritual biometrics, scanning its energetic signature to lock the graveyard spirit onto a target. But Puneet had made a mistake. Poonam hadn't been wearing her own scarf that day. She had borrowed one from her younger sister, Deepa. The ritual functioned exactly as intended, but it was fed the wrong coordinates. Because Deepa's scent was on that fabric, the entity locked onto her instead of her sister. To free Deepa, the physical doll, the todka, had to be found and destroyed. This object was the only anchor holding the marriage contract in place. But the family was too late. Puneet had just died in a high-speed car crash a week earlier. The location of the doll was a secret he had taken to his grave. Because the physical anchor was never destroyed, the ritual remains active. Deepa is still legally bound to the entity, trapped in a marriage she never agreed to. It is a stark reminder of the permanence of these forces. A petty grudge and a borrowed scarf created a cycle of misery that has outlived the man who started it, leaving an innocent woman to age in the shadow of a ghost.